Welcome back to my channel, Star Booze.
Hello everyone. It's Barry Gibb here, communicating with you from our house and ideally right to your house, and the owner of 220 million albums, Barry Gibb sold, and a $140 million personal fortune USD million has consistently been their representation of achievement. Behind however, the focus is on a number of individual tragedies and invisible specters that are unknown. I simply remind yourself to pull a pan of hot water. Accidentally over me of course, but I only 20 minutes or so to live. Steve, his oldest son Gibb, is currently the one who immediately revealed long-kept secrets. Startling facts will be verified for the first time in this particular tale. My dad is the epitome of a family man. Of the term beginning in the 1950s, Barry Gibb has already made his renowned status at the time of his brother's formation, Manchester's Rattlesnakes, signifying start of one of the biggest this century's musical adventures. Following Barry and his family relocated to Australia, his siblings kept laying the Bee Gees' foundation, the team that will characterize the disco era as a whole and make a lasting impression on the world setting for music. The Bee Gees published their first single in 1963, Unmarried, and promptly signed with Festival Note. The actual pivotal moment arrived in when the group went back to England in 1967, signed a contract with Robert Stigwood, published the album Bee Gees First, which included a number of successes, including To Love Massachusetts and Someone, placing the name of Barry Gibb on the international map of music. Amen. By 1977, the Bee Gees had gone global. Considering the Saturday Night Fever on track with over 50 million sold copies and rising to the top of the Marquette Greatest Movie, the soundtrack ever defining mania for disco. Exactly music. Additionally, Barry Gibb promptly shown his exceptional ability to write songs with a string of hits at the top of the charts in both US and UK, trailing only Paul when McCartney was ranked first. Songs that feature his distinctive falsetto. Barry confirmed that I had a dream about it. RF Martin suggested that we try yelling in falsetto. After that, it became into our distinctive look. This particular hallmark established the distinctive personality of the Bee Gees on the global scene. In addition to his success with the group, Barry also began to produce, creating his imprint on significant undertakings like Guilty, Barbara Streisand's 1980 album, starring the #1 female artist in love music alternatively, creating Eyes That See in the Dark for Islands in the Sea by Kenny Rogers. Stream is getting well known worldwide. We Have Something. By 1994, Barry and his art, the Songwriters Awards, brothers, were honored Hall of Fame. Additionally, in 1997 they were admitted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame notoriety. Two significant events, confirming their position in the history of modern music. Barry Robin Morskit's BG. Between 2000 until 2024, Barry persisted in obtaining esteemed honors like the CBE in 2002, knighthood in 20,182,023 center honors, and turned into executive producer of the biopic about BG. In 2024. In the now, his solo album 2016 peaked at #2 in the United Kingdom. Greenfield's 2021, however, was the charts in Australia and the United Kingdom, proving Barry's capacity to over decades innovate and adapt. Regarding by 2024, Barry's personal assets fortune had grown to $140 million, primarily from the rights of more than 20 top US and UK hits, studio revenue and production partnerships. The Bee Gees have sold almost 220 million albums as well. Globally, which makes Barry one of the richest and most powerful songwriters worldwide. The Saturday by itself, the Night Fever album has far exceeded all rivals in terms of sales, turning into an enduring milestone for future generations. Global media have consistently given Barry praise, calling he was the main designer of the bog sound post-2023 Washington and a real pop icon. 2025's smooth radio. Beyond as an artist, Barry represents tenacity in the face of a shifting market, and classist inventiveness. Additionally, he has stated, "I can't fathom being a pop sensation star without the help of my family." For Barry, family has always been important. People 1989 served as the firm basis and theme motivation for the duration of his 60-cat travel to the summit. After one success, one more. However, behind the scenes are emotional wounds that only those when his career achieved every highest point. Barry Gibb also started to confront significant losses and enduring encounters that would leave a lasting influence on him and the following generation. Behind the glare, the shadows. Barry's early years were not at all like Thea Tranquil. You've seen that many people envision, and he was in a catastrophic accident in 1948, when boiling severely burned him 2 years in the ocean, resulting in 2 or more years in the hospital before heckled talk once more. This encounter formed a portion of his powerful will, resilience and personality. However, it also left him emotionally scarred for life. Andy Gibb, the youngest in 1988 brother, formerly the young symbol of the whole family, died at the age of 30 because of cardiac failure along with addiction to cocaine. This was a significant loss, Shock for the entire family, including Barry, acting as a severe cautionary tale regarding the negative aspects of celebrity in the global music industry. Barry once mentioned in an People interview, Andy was the family's soul. I've never been ability to go past his setback in 2003. Morris Gibb passed away from heart. Barry's 53-year-old failure sent him into another time frame of extended mental breakdown. Less than 10 years afterwards, Barry's best friend Robin Gibb, at age 62, the songwriting partner, also passed away from cancer. The three brothers all went our planet one by one, departing Barry Gibb, the final BG to survive, preserving not just the musical heritage, but also an incalculable weight of loss. This series of setbacks forced Barry to enter a deep depressive phase that endured for many years. As per Barry's mental health previously descended into alcoholism as a coping mechanism for stress. I felt lonely and questioned. He revealed my mission following the death of my brother Suway. Why do I have so many BGs left times? Barry needed to depend on the assistance of his spouse, Linda, and mental health therapy to regain equilibrium. The Irish Times claims that Barry's Linda, his wife, has been his past support system, assisting him conquer sadness and recover stability for the family following separate turmoil. With gratitude to Linda, the familiar stayed near. However, the kids, Steve in particular, grew up feeling with pride as well as fear for their father as well as for their own prospects. International media have frequently examined that Barry's early mishap and the series of losses that have influenced his approach to music, celebrity as well as family values. CBS News has underlined that these exact experience shave produced the depth of feeling in Barry's efforts while also highlighting a reality behind the spotlight of each myth. Unseen shadows are constantly present by the spectators. As the spotlight starts to fade on stage, family and ancient wounds obligations turn into an imperceptible legacy, continuing to have an impact on all choice and each action made by the subsequent generation. Ultimately, his son's voyage is the most obvious evidence to the lasting burden of that generational insecurity. Anticipations with no way out. In 1973, Steve Gibb was born. In addition to being the oldest son of, in addition to Barry Gibb, someone who grew up between two realms that are at odds. On one side, the enormous popularity of the Bee Gees, and the remaining shadows on the ether of a family tragedy. Steve devoted the majority of his early years in Miami, where the press continuously monitored each and every move of the family of Barry Gibbs. From an early age, Steve and his parents made an appearance at significant occasions, turning into a music prince in the spotlight. However, underlying this dazzling appearance, the truth was completely. Steve was the center of attention as the Barry Gibb had turned into an airbud global celebrity with an unheard-of heritage. This put a great deal of weight on the shoulders of Steve, not just from his family as well as from music and society. Since he was in school, Steve had to discover how to look perfect in front of others, displaying a model image next to his siblings and father. He started playing the piano from an early age, although decided to take up guitar at the age of 13. Greatly impacted by his hero Van Halen. Instead of the Bee Gees in his early 20s, Steve made a total in a new direction. Rather than pursuing the disco route of the family, and he pursued rock and heavy metal instead of pop. Genres, requiring a strong rebellious spirit. Steve once remembered Dointh Lear School for the first time in Miami in 1988, when he had the audacity to display his individuality and leave the shadow of the family. Knowing that he would confront prejudice and mistrust in the 90s and 20s, Steve joined groups such as 58 Black Label, Kick, Saigon, Crowbar, Society, and every part of his endeavor to establish oneself and the legacy of the Bee Gees. Steve didn't put an end to the music. He changed his name to Barry Gibbs. 16-year-old guitar technician Lenny directly observing how the entertainment sector works in the background. These experiences provided Steve with a profound comprehension of diligence, but also emphasized how each of his accomplishments evaluated in relation to his father Stremin's heritage. American media outlets like according to the Miami Herald, Steve is among the few artists who had the courage to decide on an entirely new course in AA family with such a long history, despite the possibility of being misinterpreted, classified as someone who relies on the name of the father. The strain of inheritance and unrelenting demand had a significant psychological effect on Steve. I didn't have a normal life, he once revealed. Childhood, merely a disguised shadow for the press. It wasn't just the emotion of being observed all the time, but also someone's loneliness is always compelled to portray a flawless image. Frequently Steve made an effort to establish his own persona. However, every attempt was contrasted with his father or connected to the trademark of BG even if he never intended to do that. The Steve and Barry's relationship Gibb has had a lot of highs and lows. Though Steve occasionally resisted in an attempt to make himself heard, selecting altering his way of life and hurling himself into his personal endeavors. Nevertheless, Barry never failed to recognize his son's efforts. During the Mythology Tour in 2013, Barry spoke to hundreds of admirers, stating, "It's amazing to gaze at my oldest son on the right. He's remarkable." These remarks of encouragement turned into a potent source of encouragement for Steve, supporting him have the courage to carry on with his profession, even if the path ahead was still fraught of obstacles. Every decision Steve was an attempt to get away from Barry Gibb's shadow. However, concurrently, became a voyage that led further into as the years of rebellion subsided, Steve started to confront the severe repercussions that have been left behind by generational norms, familial expectations, suffering in a spotlight that was never able to genuinely fill the gap, and unless the stress of having to live up to the burden of the family legacy increased, Steve Gibb slowly descended into an unavoidable mental spiral. Despite having a sturdy foundation and steadfast family assistance, Steve was unable to escape the darkness. In addition to the several generations of artists, shaving had a crisis of addiction, and Steve is 14 years old. Began drinking for the first time, being the moment he consumed a full bottle Jack Daniels until he fainted, what he subsequently referred to as the first actual slip in his life. This incident wasn't not just a cautionary tale for himself, but also an indication that Steve had started to lose command. Growing older, Steve-O developed a cocaine addiction. This behavior caused him to become confused, dragging him more distant from family values as well as art. As Steve once put it, "After I was fired from the band, and I was looking through trash cans while homeless for studio food. Then, I had just 3 options: dying, jail, or a mental health facility." The time from off severe addiction additionally signaled a considerable interference with Steve's music. He was no longer trusted with significant initiatives, was left out of numerous bands in which he had participated, and progressively lost important contacts in the global rock scene. Getting out the band Crowbar had introduced him to several accomplishments, was the most obvious proof of the negative effects of losing self-control. At that moment, Steve nearly entirely vanished from main events, stopped showing up with his family, and stopped communicating with their friends and the media. Instability of mind, increasing isolation become more intense as prior injuries and present stressors crossed over. Steve slipped into a protracted depression, sometimes confronted with ideas of taking his own life in order to break the cycle of failure and addiction. He went inside rehab facilities numerous times, but didn't achieve success. Right now, Steve needed a lot of years undergoing a variety of treatments despite private difficulties prior to discovering the initial ray of hope. In a segment of Addiction Talks podcast, Steve openly acknowledged, "I lost everything, but I managed to get back." The passing of his uncle, Andy Gibb, also because of cocaine abuse in addition to Maurice's prior battles with alcohol and his dealing of heart failure, further Steve's psychological burden. A family history characterized by unrest, addiction, and observing loved ones die to young made Steve's descent even simpler. Into hopelessness. He was left with all of this, believing that his own destiny would ultimately be similar to those who came before him, except he made a significant shift. Steve's path to it wasn't only a personal struggle to recuperate, but also a mirror of the shadow that has eclipsed the whole BGSFAMILY. By having the courage to talk candidly about this traumatic past and confronting the psychological barrier head-on, Steph assisted in releasing a whole generation from the weight of suffering that is inherited, a revelation of the truth through confession. Following years of struggling with addiction, and Steve Gibb went into a new phase of chapter that confronts the past, reconstructing his profession and making the effort to verify each obscure area that the public made conjectures. Steve in sobriety following numerous relapses and failures. His biggest source of inspiration grew out of his love for his family, particularly his wife and 2 kids. In addition, the steadfast assistance from his parents, Barry Gibb in particular, played a vital part in assisting him come out of the shadows. Steve said on the podcast Addiction Talks, "I wish to assist others in avoiding made mistakes." This profound empath motivated Steve to establish Addiction Talks, a podcast devoted to sharing stories about recovery experiences and helping others in comparable circumstances worldwide. The world's media have acknowledged this as a sincere step, changing individual pain as a motivating factor for some. Additionally, Steve's musical career has recovered gradually. He went back to the Barry Gibb's main guitarist on stage band, participating in the Mythology Tour, a turning point that demonstrated the real father and son's reunion, both as artists and as family. Steve went on to co-write the record in 2016, alongside Barry and his sibling Ashley. Supporting the family's primary media sources like Steve has been featured on Hollywood Life as like his father, a musician, while confirming that his present accomplishments are the outcome of individual determination. Notably, the result of a well-known tradition among Steve's most significant disclosure shows been disclosing his past in public: homelessness, addiction, and the depths he had formerly suffered from despair. He said, "In the first time I drank, the Daily Mail at the age of 14, I consumed 1 whole Jack Daniels bottle, then fainted." These disclosures not only validate lengthy spread gossip, but also highlight his resolve to lead an honest life, refusing to conceal or refute any information regarding his own shadow. There have been several rumors about wealth and internal disputes inside the BG family. However, Steve has stated time and time again that he developed his career on his own. independent of his dad, and there hasn't been any public unrest or an inheritance dispute. This is amply illustrated by his solo musical endeavors, collective actions, as well as the endeavor tubestacles by means of his own online forums and theparas such as BG's and the Daily Mail Days have continuously commended Steve for a recovery model, an official from a generation of artists who don't hesitate to talk about the past honestly, willing should get to their feet, and make sure that originally designated as a stain. Steve's travel has turned to become a source of motivation for individuals who have faced difficulties with mental illness, addiction, and the demands of celebrity. No longer residing in Steve's shadow of Barry, Gibbs has confirmed each rumor with the truth and changed entering hardship as the basis for a new legacy of integrity and bravery. Additionally, this story presents a fresh viewpoint that surpasses all the splendor on the BG family, truth and the determination to overcome a darkness that genuinely defines an army. At the moment, Steve Gibb keeps walking with his father in music and motivates others by community initiatives, demonstrating that the significance of BG extends beyond its time but also in the power of the soul of people who have the courage to confront reality. Steve's affirmation journey is a key conclusion, putting an end to long-running rumors and starting a new family chapter. If Barry Gibb's path and Steve Gibb has altered your viewpoint, leave the spotlight behind for the truth, your opinions in the space provided here. Remember to sign up for our channel to stay up to date with more undiscovered tales. The following tale might be something you never anticipated.